And welcome everyone to this wonderful special presentation from the Puget Sound chapter of NATS. My name is Megan Renee Parker. I am the president of our local NATS chapter, and we are so tickled to bring with us today Dr. Joshua Glasner to talk to us about online lesson technology. If you're like me, you don't know what you don't know, and you've been probably doing it the same way with some basic stuff on Zoom over the pandemic. So I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Glasner. I don't know if we can all do like a round of applause via your Zoom screens. You can just picture the most thunderous applause filling that muted room there. Yes, and so without further ado, I'd love to tell you a little bit more about our special guest, Josh, here. Josh is a singer, researcher, and teacher whose passion is bridging the art and science of the singing voice. His multidisciplinary research spans broad-ranging topics, including, but not limited to, voice pedagogy, digital signal processing, auditory perception of the human voice, and treatment efficacy. Dr. Glasner's scholarly work has been presented nationally and internationally and has been published in peer-reviewed journals such as the Journal of Voice and the Journal of Acoustical Society of America. Dr. Glasner holds degrees in voice performance and voice pedagogy from the University of Delaware and Westminster Choir College, a certificate in vocology from the National Center for Voice and Speech, and a research doctorate from New York University. And we should all go check him out at joshuaglasner.com. All right, let's welcome Josh. Hooray!
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today and for taking time out of your Sunday. I'm going to share my screen real quickly. I haven't done one of these types of talks for a few years now. We used to do a lot of these talks back during the pandemic, and now it's interesting how technology's changed even in that short amount of time, right? So the the goal of today really, and actually that bio means that I don't really need to tell you kind of how my kind of like positionality, as it were. It says here that I'm assistant professor of speech language pathology at Delaware Valley University, which is true. But all of my education up until now has actually been in voice pedagogy. So I'm kind of intersecting between the two fields right now, but most of my work over the past 5 or 6 years has been in digital signal processing and voice pedagogy. During the pandemic, my colleagues and I did a number of different presentations on this topic and found a bunch of different solutions for different use cases, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So here's the plan. We're going to orient our discussion, kind of figure out what you all feel like you want and need from this talk. I'm sure all of our needs have changed since 2020, right? So I want to know best how what your needs are. We'll talk about the big picture, the things that will most, I guess, give the biggest bang for the buck, right? The things that will really help you, and kind of a general framework of how to approach these types of problems and solutions. We will talk about equipment, but I want to tell you right now that the equipment part of this is not going to be you should go buy a Yeti. It's going to be you should go and look at the specs, and these are the kinds of things that you're going to be looking for different use cases. So that's just a little disclaimer there. We'll talk about different platforms we can use. Of course, I'll go over a little bit about Zoom because I'm sure all of us would love to look at those settings again. But there are a number of different things outside of Zoom that are potentially really exciting that you might not actually know about, because once we find something that works, typically as humans, we stick with that, right? So there are some things that might be really exciting to you, and that's one of my hopes for today, that I can share something with you that we might have used for certain purposes during the pandemic that could be really exciting for you, maybe not just as a teacher, but also as a performer. So that's one of the things we'll be talking about with the platforms, and we'll have time for question and answer. If there are little details that you want me to expound upon from the talk, I'm happy to do that there. If you have use cases rather, that you want to explore, I'm happy to do that as well. So, this is the point where you can feel free to type in the chat, which I have up, or you can unmute yourself. What are things that you want to know by the end of this hour that we have together? Yeah, Kathleen.
If there's anything new in the last 2 years, like you said, we stick to the same thing and it seems to be working okay. But of course, there's the ongoing problem of lag and things like that. But, if there's anything we're missing.
Absolutely. So, especially on that kind of lag and high fidelity, train, as it were, I'm sure that there's some aspects there that could be really exciting. Thank you, Kathleen. Suzanne?
I would like to know if there's a way for someone who's doing a lesson on a phone only to adjust his sound the way we can do original sound on and off. I can't get him to be able to do that on a phone.
Sure. We can talk about that. And if I don't talk about that around the time when I'm talking about Zoom settings, you just, flag me. Davida.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. I am very curious about, I'm needing eventually, maybe possibly sooner than later, but who knows, a new computer. And I have a MacBook Pro and the sound is great on it. And I've heard, so I want to know if I were to get a new MacBook Pro, is the sound going to be as good? Some people say, oh yeah, it's better. And some people say it's not as good as the old ones. My computer's 12 years old.
Sure. And do you mean the sound as in like the output or the input, the microphone that you're speaking into, or the speakers that you're getting?
The speakers that I'm getting.
Perfect.
Yeah, but possibly both, but I'm not the one doing the singing. So, but it, it's been working fantastic, but
Absolutely.
12-plus-year-old computer.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, we can talk about that. And I think you'll have some solutions as even before we get to that point. So absolutely.
Thank you.
And we have Alexis in the chat who says, Zoom used to work brilliantly for me. Now it's extremely variable as far as being able to hear the student. They've changed the settings, keep trying different things. How much is determined by what the equipment what equipment the student is using. Sure, absolutely. We can discuss that. And again, once we get to the Zoom stuff, if I haven't answered any of these specific questions, again, feel free to flag me. Christy. Yeah, Christy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing about how I can help my students select equipment for themselves, because I know what I use and it's working well for me. And I feel like I know a little bit, but I'd like to know more about how to steer them in the right direction according to their price points.
Yes, absolutely. Fantastic. So with all that in mind, and if you have other questions, other things you want to know about, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll keep an eye out for them. The first thing we want to just kind of develop as a framework here is that things are going to continue to change, right? Just because we're talking about something, just because something worked 2 years ago, doesn't mean that we necessarily have to stick with that. It doesn't mean that necessarily we have to change from that, nor does it mean necessarily that there won't be something significantly better in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, right? We should expect that things are going to change and our understanding of the technology is going to change. So for example, I'm sure that there are things that I said 3 years ago and I'm recorded and on YouTube saying that are wrong now, right? I'm sure I know that the technology has improved since then and evolved since then. So just going through this, there's this really interesting phenomenon that I've observed with the pandemic and post-pandemic, that we want to feel like we did the best thing for our students, right? And that's probably true, right? Like that everyone did the best they could for their students during a time of extreme change, if you will, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't ourselves kind of adjust and use technology differently and could have still been doing a really good service for our students, right? Those two things can be true. And so I want to hold those two things in both hands, right? Or hold those ideas in both hands. We did really amazing things during the pandemic, and now we have different needs potentially. And not only that, but this online teaching thing, first of all, isn't going away. NATS is very clear about that in terms of their recent surveys. that they've completed about voice teaching and who teaches online, who teaches in person, what percentage of your business is online. This is not going away. And so what would happen if you're able to, how would your business change, if you expanded your range via the internet, right? What if you were able to play piano with your students with no lag and with no perceivable decay in the audio signal, right? What would happen if that was a service you could provide to your students? Would it expand? It's very well possible that it could. So, big picture here is that our group wanted to enable music making during the pandemic. And so the particular horse that we got on was, how can we make sure that we offer less or lagless or slightly imperceptible laggy music making options? So one of the difficulties was that we found options very early on. By June of 2020, we found some really excellent options for making music with no decay in the audio quality, but those were really pretty complex solutions. It's not necessarily that they cost a lot of money, though some of them did, but they weren't necessarily the easiest applications to work with. Pardon my prepositions. They weren't necessarily the easiest things to use. But this really guided a lot of our work. We wanted to make sure that despite distance, people could still make music together. But at this point, while that can be incredibly useful for a number of different reasons, imagine how you could reduce your carbon footprint by not having to travel an hour to the closest accompanist, right? Or collaborative pianist, or even a larger music group, right? If you didn't have to spend that time driving, you can A, spend that time making money, and B, be a little bit more, depending on your how much it factors into your actions, you might be able to decrease how much you're affecting the environment with a choice like this. If you could actually make music in real time with no perceptible difference, right? Have it be so that the person sounded like they were 5 feet away from you, right? But that's not what everybody's looking for. So all these decisions have to consider your own use case. If your use case is mom doesn't want to bring their 12-year-old an hour away, well, you probably don't need to tell them that they need to buy this laundry list of equipment, right? You probably don't have to have this whole solution where they can where you can play music in real time with them, though perhaps playing piano with the 12-year-old could be really helpful. So you have to consider yourself, what is this really the best use of the technology? Is this the most efficient path, right? You have to consider your use case. I have no financial disclosures, but I do want to give a shout out to my collaborators who throughout the pandemic had done a number of different talks and number of different projects related to all of this. So Ian Howell, Kayla Godero, Nick Perna, and Chadley Ballantyne. In terms of the big picture, everything costs something. We can either choose to spend time or we can choose to spend money, right? It might be in a really micro analysis of this equation, right? That a laggy solution is literally taking more time for sound to get to us. Or it could be an issue of going through all those different Zoom settings when we can't actually control the algorithm as effectively as other options potentially, or as precisely as other options. It might be that we need to troubleshoot a number of different technology related issues or equipment related issues, or we could buy some equipment that was really stable and really and didn't require a lot of fuss. There, in any equation, we have to balance this idea of time and money. So I think that's also helpful when we start thinking about different price points. If an individual would have bought a USB, if everybody and their mother was told to buy a Yeti microphone, which they were, and they bought the Yeti microphone for $80 to $120 in 2020, and then used that microphone, but couldn't sing as loudly using that microphone because it has dynamic range issues, or had some noise in the sound because there's a lower signal to noise ratio or a higher signal to noise ratio with that technology. Would it really have been what would be the cost of investing in a microphone that was $200 or $300 in 2020 and then parsing that expense out over 3 or 4 years, or 2 or 3 years, I should say? These are reasonable questions to ask ourselves. And of course, we are also dealing with the issue of students who have varying degrees of access to funds for this technology, for this equipment, right? So this is kind of this idea of trying to make sure that we're considering the use case for our particular situation, as well as things like cost. If I have a professional singer and I really want to hear nuances, I'm gonna push. I actually won't take on professional singers if they aren't willing to invest in equipment. But that's a personal decision for me because I want to hear that nuance. And my sense is that if a professional singer isn't willing to invest in the equipment for me to do this kind of nuanced work, then they might be better off with an in-person lesson, right? At this point. But again, we're 3 years after the pandemic started. So it's a much more nuanced conversation, I think, nowadays. The other part of the big picture and this is if you take nothing else away today, this is what I want you to take away. The best thing you can do right now, if you haven't already done it, is plug your laptop into a router with an Ethernet cable. These things cost $5 to $15, and they will anytime that you are experiencing a significant lag, a significant delay in any kind of application with your students, anytime that you're experiencing that with your students, the likelihood is that the Wi-Fi is having a little bit of a glitch, right? And so just by plugging yourself into hardwiring your computer to your internet connection, and that might require a 100-foot long cable, right? But there's actually no signal degradation. If the most inconvenient thing that you have to do to provide a good service to your students is to run a long cable through your house to get to your internet, to your router, right? That's going to save a significant amount of hassle during a lesson, and it's going to provide a much not a stronger service, but a higher quality service to your clients then. So if you get nothing else from today, if you're not already using an Ethernet cable instead of Wi-Fi, that's going to make a huge difference in your quality, in the quality of your connection. If you decided to then go a step further, right? We're talking about equipment now. If you decided to go a step further and you wanted to really maximize either the sound that your students were giving you, right? We're sending you, or the sound that you are sending your students, depending on how much you sing during lessons or play during lessons potentially. The next step is to use something outside of your microphone on your computer, or outside of a microphone that's plugged in with a USB. Though the microphone plugged in with a USB for you might be enough, right? If you're not singing with your students, if you're not singing for your students much at all, if you're not demonstrating much at all, then a USB microphone on your side would probably be appropriate, would probably be fine, because those singers are just going to have to hear instructions from you. They're not going to have to hear demonstrations. That being said, if you demonstrate for your students and you really prioritize them being able to hear nuances with your voice, or developing that kind of those perceptual skills, then what you're going to need is, or you might consider getting, would be an audio interface. The audio interface provides power to condenser microphones. It allows you to connect a microphone with an XLR cable to a computer. And it allows you to easily adjust the gain, both for the microphone and for the headphones. So for example, if I have a colleague, if I have a colleague during meetings who has their microphone up really high, all I have to do, instead of going through all my settings, all I have to do is turn a knob on my audio interface, and that makes that kind of conversation, that kind of communication a little bit easier. If they say they can't hear me, all I need to do is turn a knob on my audio interface, rather than going into a number of different settings and perhaps having something wrong with Zoom, or having something wrong with my computer, or having something wrong with the microphone itself, right? This makes troubleshooting much easier, and it allows you to upgrade your microphone. Lower signal to noise ratio just means that you're going to be using a microphone that has less noise in the signal, right? That's exactly what it says in the term. And then it also will have a larger dynamic range. One of the things that a lot of you may have noticed with USB microphones is that the dynamic range, it was very hard to teach, especially loud singers or Western classical singers, because at a certain point, which was really a pretty middling loudness or dynamic level, you would start to get some distortion in the microphone. And you might even notice this with some of your clients who might even have the microphone a little too close, right? That there's some distortion in the sound, and they're not even that loud, right? So that's an issue of the conversion, the type of conversion that's happening from analog to digital within the USB port. But using an audio interface gives you a wider dynamic range, so you won't find that singers are clipping, is what it's called. They're not having that distortion. So the point of this is that it actually allows you to use some equipment that is a little bit more easily controlled and a little bit higher quality, not just in terms of it being a higher quality piece of equipment, but also more specifically that you can actually hear what the singer is creating, what the singer is producing more accurately. In terms of microphones, you know, I always remember getting this question a lot, right? We have all these different kinds of microphones, and the question is, which one do I choose? You know, Davida was asking about what computer, and we're going to get to my real answer for this question, which is honestly to try using headphones for this. But with these microphones, it's not so much important which one. I could tell you to go buy a certain microphone. Oh, and we have some questions. I'm so sorry. We have, what about a tap connection that uses your house wiring? I'd have to read up on that. But my sense is that I think that that's still a wireless connection. And anytime you have a wireless connection, you're going to run the risk of having issues with stability, with connection stability. And then there's another question here, which is how much does the audio interface cost? That can be anywhere from $100 to much, much more. But there are certainly packages that you can purchase, like that would be. Honestly, some of my students use them, and they are. Some of my students use really high-end equipment, and some of my students use these packaged bundles, and all of it is significantly better than just using a USB microphone. You'll notice a significant difference between those pieces of equipment. So really, 100 or more. Kathleen, did you want to say something?
Thank you. I can't type as fast as I can talk, obviously. So you're saying that the audio interface is better than the Yeti microphone. Say you have a Shure SM, what are the 58s, with a usual Shure, plugged into an audio interface into your computer. That's going to be better than this Yeti thing?
It's a little, okay, so these are issues of use case, right? So we're going to get into different types of microphones in the next slide, and that's why I'm hesitating here. The Shure is going to have a wider dynamic range than the Yeti, and I think for that reason it's really helpful. But the Shure is actually a different type of microphone that isn't actually, unless you're working with commercial singers, it's not necessarily going to be the most accurate microphone. It's going to actually filter the sound a little bit and make your singers, usually, depending how far away it is, usually sound a little bit warmer than they actually are, a little bit darker than they actually are in real life.
What, the Yeti will or the Shure?
The
Yeti.
Shure, the
Shure.
Shure,
Okay.
right? So it's a little bit of a trade-off. I don't know that I would probably go with, I know the Shure is what, like $120 ish.
It's just I have those. Those are what I.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and remember, for you, it might not matter as much as for your students,
Oh, okay, yeah.
right? Because I mean, I say that my advice is always prioritize what you hear as the teacher and prioritize the thing that picks up your singers for the singers.
So give them the Yeti, and I'll keep them the Shure.
Or suggest that they purchase a microphone that is a little bit, if you're going that path, suggest that they purchase a microphone that has a little bit of higher fidelity, so it picks up the audio a little bit more accurately.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we'll keep going over this. I get that's a tricky question, which is why it deserved more of an explanation.
Can I ask, because I don't like the Yeti. I'm not impressed. I bought it and it's just, yeah, I don't know if it's the settings. I'm just not impressed with it. And I don't know if it's me or.
Well, I mean, I can give you a blithe answer. I could ask you, what don't you like about it?
Well, it's hard to tell. I've tried to record myself on Zoom.
Right.
To see. I went through all the settings. I mean, it's not that different than just my system.
Right.
You know, I wasn't impressed.
So that, and we'll talk about that once we get to the different platforms, of course. I think that might answer some of your questions.
Also, I don't mean to, but going back to the tab connection, that is an Ethernet you plug this connector into your wire, into a plug, and then you plug an Ethernet cable into your computer, and it's supposed to send through the cable. So is that still wireless?
If it's wired, yes. If that's my apologies for not understanding that system is
I don't know if it works any better or not. Again, I tried it and
I mean,
I don't know.
there are ways to figure out how stable your connection is, but my sense is if you have your computer connected via wire to your internet, to your router in any way, I think that's what I'm talking about here. That will result in stability rather than going off of the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think you can feel good about that. Yeah, Davida.
Apropos to just right now, what makes it so in a Zoom setting like this, in a Zoom meeting, where certain people like Kathleen that was just talking, and I've noticed it with Christy, are just like unbelievably loud, like painfully loud, and other people I can hear them just fine, and other people it's like you can barely hear them.
Right.
Is
And
that
when I talk about gain, this is what I'm talking about. Different it could be at the level of their microphone, it could be at the level of their audio interface, it could be at the level of their computer. But for any of those individuals, for anyone, I shouldn't even say individuals, when you're listening to someone on Zoom and someone is louder than another individual, that just means that their mic is turned up louder than the other. So the gain is higher.
Okay.
So that's not something you can change, right? And I'll say, honestly, I should have asked you from the get-go how my levels were, but I actually have some colleagues that I work with who very frequently say that my microphone levels are too low, that they have trouble hearing me. I joke around that they should put headphones on, but ultimately, but this is a pretty typical thing because we're not all working from the same box. Does that answer your question, Davida?
Yeah, because this happens also in our meetings. This is the only meetings that well, it's not true, but like meetings with a lot of people, and it's just like I'm scrambling to turn my my.
So one of the things I do to try to kind of mitigate that any kind of issue that could happen with my levels is when I start talking, I just ask, how are my levels? I didn't do that today, I should have. But I'll ask my colleagues, how are my levels today? And if they can hear me fine, then we just move on. But if they can't hear me well enough, then that tells them either they have to change their output level, or I have to change my microphone level.
Okay, that doesn't help when other people talk. And
But yet, if everybody, I agree. I understand what
I
you're
mean, it's
saying.
like it's painful. It's really
Yeah, sounds like something we could do on a Mickey Mouse roll call for our next board
Exactly.
meeting.
Exactly.
Thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
okay.
Yeah. So we have all of these different microphone possibilities, right? But really, and I can give you these slides, or even I think I have a handout that lists some of this information. When we're looking for microphones, so Christy's saying, you know, what microphones do I suggest for different price points? And what I always say is the microphones are going, the technology keeps changing, the equipment keeps changing. What you can do though is you can point them to certain, you know, specifications, certain things that will, generally speaking, give you a consistent sound, and for them will be, you know, a way to check that the type of microphone they're buying is the one that you want for singing, for lessons. So one thing that we want to pay attention to is the polar pattern. Generally speaking, we want an omnidirectional polar pattern for this. The reason why is because it will allow you to either pick up the sound as it is in the room, or allow you to have this microphone really close. This is one of the reasons why Kathleen was saying about the Shure, and I was kind of like hedging a little bit. The Shure microphone is a cardioid microphone, and if you bring that type of microphone close to your mouth, what will happen is the sound will actually get filtered so that it gets a little bit darker, a lot darker in fact, because of something called the proximity effect. So one way to fix that is you can have the student move the microphone, I believe 15 or 30 centimeters or more away from the student's mouth, and what I suggest is for my clients is simply buy an omnidirectional microphone, so that's never an issue, right? If I want the sound to be a little bit like dry, right, so it doesn't have so much room in it, I just move closer. And if I want to hear more of the room in the sound, all I do is move away from the microphone, and you can hear the difference, I hope, between this, and I'm not actually changing the actual volume of my voice. I'm just moving closer and further away. So omnidirectional microphones. The frequency response is really how the sound, how the microphone filters your sound. So generally speaking, we want to get as close, I think, for my clients, what I prefer is to hear what's happening in the room. And if that's what you actually want, then actually what you want is for this line to be flat. So you see here, this is a spectrum, and we have on the x-axis we have frequency, on the y-axis we have sound intensity level. So it's telling us how much energy is in any given frequency, or frequency area. And in this gray, you can see that it's, simply speaking, it's not flat, right? We can see that there's some bumps, some ripples in this. And that's telling us that around 2,000 to 9,000 hertz, actually, and I know what microphone this is. This is the Shure SM57. So what we can tell from this is that there's actually a little bit of a boost in the 2,000 to 9,000 hertz range, which means that the sound's going to be a little bit ringier, a little bit brighter, except when we bring it a little bit closer. So there's this kind of like inconsistency of the sound to some extent. But we also notice around this 50 to 100 hertz range, there's a dip. So it's actually, in a way, trying to counterbalance the possibility of the proximity effect. But in any event, this chart shows us that the sound that goes into the microphone is not the sound that comes out of the speakers. It's not the sound that's being recorded, because this is filtering the sound that we put into the microphone, right? So when you look at this, almost every microphone will have a chart like this. We want to try to find something that is as flat as possible. That might not always be possible, but that's an ideal kind of situation, because it means that you'll be able to hear exactly what's happening in the room. And then we have this, this dynamic microphone versus a condenser microphone. Generally speaking, we want to go for the condenser microphone, because the dynamic microphone is going to have some nonlinear effects. That's a really not a nerdy way of saying it. There's it'll change the sound inconsistently. And again, as a voice teacher, what I care about is hearing exactly what's going on in the room. That might not be, but let's say Kathleen has a student who has a Shure SM57, and they are it doesn't even matter what kind of music they sing. Let's imagine that you have a singer who has an SM57. They don't have the funds to do that. One of the things you could suggest is simply hold the microphone further away, right? And then you have you have more of a likelihood that what you get from that microphone is going to be what the singer is actually producing, right? So it's these kind of little rules, if you will. If this, then that. This would be great, but we can't do this, so we're going to do this take this other route, right? But generally speaking, condenser microphone is what I would suggest, which then makes the audio interface necessary. So I probably could have switched these slides, and that would have kind of given us the reason to have the audio interface. Also, remember that with this, what I've already said with the USB microphone versus the XLR connected microphone, the maximum sound level that you can make with a USB microphone is going to be lower. Your singers won't be able to make very loud sounds without being distorted with these USB microphones. And that's the reason we, generally speaking, want to stay away from those. Yeah, the audio interface is going to, and the microphone, yeah, those are going to cost more. Generally speaking, probably, I would bet probably in the realm of $200 more in total. But if you can't hear your singer singing loudly, I don't know that that's a really reasonable solution, right? With the USB microphones, if they can't make the full range of their sounds, that's to me, I think, a little bit of a problem. That being said, imagine you have someone who is, doing maybe, what if they're singing kind of like acoustic, like commercial music, like folk music even, and they don't actually get that loud, and they usually hold their SM57 really close to the mouth when they're on stage, right? Maybe a USB microphone would be fine in that case because they're actually making pretty soft sounds most of the time, right? For that specific use case, right? This is why I say we have to pay attention to our use case. This, I think, is going to help Davida quite a lot. When Davida was talking about what computer to buy, what I thought was happening here, and what she confirmed, was that she's listening to the sound coming out of her computer, right? And one of the best things that she can do to make sure that the audio quality is really strong, and this actually doesn't even require an audio interface, though it can use an audio interface. One of the best things that any of us can do then is grab a pair of headphones. Now, I can't tell you what headphones to buy because every head is literally shaped differently. And so the way that people actually measure the frequency response of a pair of headphones actually uses a dummy head that is consistent. It is consistently shaped, and so therefore just you and I having a different sized head or a different amount of facial hair, any of these things will actually change the sound that we get from the headphones. So whether or not headphones sound better, that's very much a personal preference kind of thing, because it's very much a self-perception, or an issue of self-perception. But what I will say is that if you notice that your singers die off after a little, like specifically on a sustained note, they all of a sudden start getting quieter, right? And you can't change that. The reason why that's happening is because of echo cancellation in Zoom or in another program. What you can do instead is ask them to wear headphones while they're singing their lesson. If you and they are wearing headphones, then you can actually turn echo cancellation off, and you'll be able to hear them sing sustained phrases again, or sustained notes again, or do lip trills again, right? The thing that a lot of people don't like about headphones is that sometimes your voice can get a little bit tired if you're wearing headphones for extended periods of time. And so one of the things that I suggest, and that's the Lombard effect is not quite that, but it's similar enough that your voice might get tired if you're in a loud environment or if you can't hear yourself speak. The headphones that I suggest are actually what are called open back headphones. So these actually, if someone were to talk to me and I had my headphones really close to the microphone, you'd actually be able to hear that coming out of the headphones, hear the person speaking to me coming out of the headphones. What that does for me, though, is it allows me to hear what's going on in the room, and that keeps me from, so specifically allows me to hear my voice in the room. That keeps me from getting fatigued, right? For hours on end, right? So headphones are helpful because they allow you to turn off elements of the algorithm in the signal processing algorithm in Zoom, right? And if you use open back headphones, you may be less likely to get vocally fatigued. And not only that, but if your students have open back headphones, then they'll be able to hear themselves in the room a little bit more, and they'll be less negatively affected by wearing headphones while singing, right? I have a couple questions from Alexis here. What about built-in mics on smartphones? So there's actually a really interesting study that was presented at Voice Foundation just this summer, where they found that while we don't want to be using smartphones for voice research, that actually there are not significant differences between different acoustic measurements between these two different, measurement microphones like this one and iPhone microphones. So if your student is using an iPhone, the microphone might be completely okay. And if they're using a microphone, the internal microphone and headphones plugged in to the iPhone, you might actually get really good quality sounds with no echo cancellation. The problem, of course, is that you're not connected to Ethernet, and so the consistency of that connection, the stability of that connection, might not be as great as it could be. That being said, if that's the only choice and you have a student who's like, yeah, let me wear headphones and I'll plug the headphones into the phone and I'll have an iPhone here, if that's what they can afford, again, that's a use case, right? That's an entirely reasonable solution. So if both are wearing headphones, does it no, it does not automatically turn on. Sorry, I should read the question. Alexis asks, so if both are wearing headphones, does it automatically turn off echo cancellation, or are we changing a Zoom setting? You're changing a Zoom setting in that, and I'll show you in a couple slides what that looks like. As I said, headphones also have a frequency response, but that's not really to be trusted. And you can use noise cancellation headphones, but those noise cancellation headphones aren't going to be open back usually. So again, you have to figure out what's important to you. Tavita, yeah.
So, okay, so open back, I've never heard of that, of open back headphones. And I don't think I could wear headphones, but a lot of my students do. But I always tell them to take one off. Is that the same thing? Because I want them to be able to hear themselves if they're completely blocked.
So the reason for using open back headphones is similar. And what I'd say is that there's a brand of I haven't looked at the price for a while, but there was a brand that was like $50 for open back headphones, and my clients who have used them are really surprised by how much they can hear their voice in the room. The problem is that most of your students are probably using those earbuds, and that is occluding no, they're not.
No.
Okay.
So one other thing is, forgive me, my 70-year-old brain, but so echo cancellation is a bad thing for voice lessons, and they need to turn that off. There should be no echo cancellation. It should be unchecked or whatever.
If they have headphones, that would be a way. Having headphones is a solution for being able to turn off echo cancellation. The problem with echo cancellation is that what it's looking for is it's looking for a signal, that the algorithm is looking for sounds that are the same. And so you can imagine if you're singing an ah for 5 seconds, well, the computer algorithm is going to find that and say, oh, that sound is the same, and it'll gradually get softer.
Yeah.
Right? So when you hear that problem, that is echo cancellation. Mm-hmm. And so if you can find ways to avoid having echo cancellation on, such as having headphones, that would be, I think, probably preferable to not be able to have sustained sounds in singing.
Yeah. And it's usually a crapshoot when, especially when you're seeing somebody for the first time and they're trying to figure things out,
Yes.
and so it's like, yeah, that doesn't work. Okay, get rid of that, and and eventually we find something that works, or they get a microphone or something, But it's a crapshoot every single time when
Right.
you're starting out with
And
somebody.
so one of the things that I do to kind of try to ease that first lesson is I'll actually offer a 20-minute consult, where I help them I use one of the platforms that I typically use, to show them what they could be hearing compared to, say, Zoom. That just because that's one of the services I offer. And then what I'll do is I'll talk them through the type of equipment or settings that I'll be using, right? And so for you, that might be potentially a solution where you say, okay, we have 20 minutes devoted here to just walk through your settings so we don't use your lesson time for that.
It's usually informally necessary to do.
Sure.
And I
Sure.
and I always, it's like, okay, we just have to settle and figure out what this is.
Sure.
But yeah, but it's just,
Absolutely.
it really feels like a crapshoot,
Absolutely.
So okay, thank
I
you.
completely understand. Of course. So actually, I do have a prettier chart, but this is actually a nice little cheat sheet for the type of equipment that could be useful if you wanted to use some of these different platforms that I'm going to talk about in a moment. Or if you wanted to kind of just, if you're maybe 3 years post-COVID, right, you want to just upgrade a little bit, this would be a way to kind of consider what types of specs you might want to look at, what type of equipment you might want to look at. And I'll send this out. So different platforms here. We have laggy solutions, right? So lag is using Zoom. Let's say if Megan were to unmute herself, which I'm not asking to, but if Megan were to unmute herself and we were to have a conversation, it would be really difficult, as you know, to have a really fluid conversation. We would have to wait a longer period of time than we might in person, right? And that's because Zoom has at least 250 to or more milliseconds of lag, of delay between this data getting to you, or going into my microphone through my computer and getting to you, and then your sound getting back to me. So one of another way to think about that is that I believe the number is between 30 or 40 milliseconds. I bet it's 25 or 30 milliseconds, and that is considered real time, perceptually lagless. So one of the things that we found difficult during the pandemic was we couldn't sing happy birthday on Zoom, right? We can't play piano on Zoom. We had other, things that other platforms we could use to kind of, or some pianists became really, really good at just like playing a little bit sooner than when they heard the singer, right? That there were solutions that we found. The laggy applications are over here on the left: Zoom, Clean Feed, Source Connect Now, Live Lab. The difference between some of these is that Zoom has since started to introduce some settings that allow you to hear your communication partners with really high audio fidelity, so like without any decay in the audio signal. But there are other programs like Clean Feed that actually do not filter your sound at all. But there is a slight delay. I'd say that Clean Feed has less of a lag than Zoom, which is potentially, if you wanted to just go up a step without going all the way to the most advanced thing, that might be something to try out. It costs a very small amount of money. Actually, I think it costs less than Zoom. And then Live Lab is a video service that both has audio and video, but the video is free. So you would have Clean Feed, which is a little cheaper than Zoom, and Live Lab, which is free. And you can use these two things simultaneously. You could also use something like Live Lab, which does both audio and video. And the audio quality in the past has been a little bit better than Zoom, which is nice. As I said, that in the past we had some solutions that were a little bit complicated. They were superior. They were like really strong solutions, but they were not very user friendly. Nowadays, the thing that I actually use, not just predominantly but solely, is FarPlay. FarPlay costs also a minimal amount per month. It's a subscription service, but it uses both audio, or it gives you both audio connection and video connection, and you can record the audio within the application. They suggest that you are connected via Ethernet and that both parties are wearing headphones, right? Because there is no echo cancellation, and because it's in real time, actually in real time, depending on how far away you are from your client, you can actually play piano with your students. You can actually perform with your colleagues with this, assuming everyone is using a similar setup connected with Ethernet using headphones, right? Generally, I've used this with students who use a USB microphone, but that's a little bit touch and go. So generally speaking, we want audio interface, microphone, Ethernet, headphones. This is the best case scenario, I think, but it's not nearly as complicated. It's not complicated at all. It's the same as Zoom with less settings that you have to go search and find, right? So FarPlay is a really great solution if what you're looking to do is play with your students, play with your colleagues, right? If you're looking to improve your audio quality on Zoom, there are ways that we can do that too, which we've talked about. Christy says, does a student need a FarPlay subscription or just a teacher? Just the teacher. So it's like something like $5 or $6 a month. And you can, I know I have colleagues who are playing with their students, playing piano with their students across to different continents or across this continent. It's very impressive stuff. And again, if you're a performer and you want to collaborate with your pianist, colleague, and you don't want to take that 2 hours plus of drive one way, driving two ways, or the gas money, right? It's a really attractive solution, I think. So only the teacher needs the FarPlay solution, just one person. When we're talking about audio fidelity, I like this old image that we used to use. The one on the bottom is Sound Jack, I believe, which is similar to FarPlay, but you can just think of all of these programs that use high fidelity audio. And then this one at the top is Zoom at the time. So where you see black, this means that all of this sound is gone, and these are the same exact audio signals. So you can see that you're missing everything from about 7,500 hertz, 7,500 hertz or higher, right? So we have time on the x-axis, frequency on the y-axis, sound intensity level is how yellow or red it is. So if you see black, that means there's no signal. And down at the bottom, you can see that there is actual information going all the way up to 20,000 hertz or so. Well, something like that, 15,000 hertz. So that's an objective difference, which is fun to look at. We're running on low on time, so this was with Sound Jack. I'm just going to play a couple, 10-30 seconds of it. Tell me if you can't hear it. I'm not one to lecture, how could I dare? Someone like me who's been mainly nowhere. So that's one, that's using Sound Jack and Live Lab between two different rooms that were separated by 2 floors. And then this one is using Clean Feed and Live Lab. This was separated by a number of states. We have to rely on my internet connection right now, unfortunately. There we are. just going to fast forward a little.
That, as you say, more.
And one of the things that I think is a little bit, my sound should be set up for original sound on here, but there's a chance that actually that didn't sound much different than most things on Zoom to you. So if you're still curious about that, I'm happy to send you those 2 links so you can listen to them a little bit outside of the context of a Zoom meeting, right? So if I'm showing you this is how it can sound different from Zoom, but I'm showing it to you through Zoom, then actually it's going to be filtered by Zoom. So I'm happy to send you email links for that. So these are the settings for if you wanted to use original sound with this high fidelity audio with Zoom. Notice that echo cancellation is not clicked. And notice that the Zoom optimized audio is not clicked. That's where we would have a lot of background noise cancellation. But this one is if we wanted to use echo cancellation, if we didn't have headphones, for example, but we did want to hear a little bit higher fidelity sound without taking out the noise in the room, right? So we would have echo cancellation. We still would have that die off, that kind of controlled sound with a sustained sound. But this would be an option if people want to use no headphones. So again, I'll send this to everybody, but these are the settings that we would use. These are just a couple thoughts to wrap up, and we're at time, so I'm happy to stay on after if people have questions, but this is the last slide. So the specifications for this tech mean much more than you choosing the right one, the right piece of equipment, the right brand, right? What matters is this technology doing what you want it to do, right? So that omnidirectional microphone, the condenser microphone rather than a USB microphone, or a microphone with an XLR cable rather than a USB microphone, a USB microphone rather than a built-in microphone, right? These are different choices we can make, but the most important thing is the technology doing what you need it to do? As I said earlier, the Ethernet cable is the one thing, if you're not doing it right now, this is going to change your life. It'll be a much more stable connection, and it costs between $5 and $15. I do not teach a student if they don't have this, because it's not I'll buy it for them if they're concerned about, you know, the financial part of $5 to $15. I'll buy this for them just so that we can have stable lessons. Remember that everyone has different goals, so depending on your clientele, you might need different things than me. You might prioritize different things than me, and that's absolutely fine. And then the thing that's really exciting to me is that you can offer high fidelity and real-time lessons right now. This we didn't think was actually physically possible in 2020. There were people who would say this is actually, in terms of the actual physics, it is impossible to do this. But we're doing it now. It's absolutely possible. And I think that for music making, for collaboration, for being, you know, feeling like you're in the same room with your students, it's I think really empowering, right? And quite exciting. And that's my dog. Okay, so as I said, we're at time. I'm happy to stay here and answer some questions just because I went a little bit longer than I anticipated. But
wonderful. Thank you so much, Josh. I'm giving like a round of applause here, hopefully echoed in our room. We've come a long way since I know I last plugged into this topic when it was the like sound jack plus multiple things, and I just went, it's too complicated. So learned a lot here. And as I was ticking through the questions, I feel like we covered pretty much everything with the voice lag, phone settings, you know, computer speaker settings, and also student equipment for those questions like what microphone should I buy, directing them to the right type of microphone, not necessarily just the price point.
Absolutely.
Are there any more questions from the room? Davida, I see your hand there. Feel free to unmute yourself.
So from what you said before, I don't have to worry about if I have to get a new MacBook Pro. the sound quality, that what I need is the what was that, the
open back headphones.
open back headphones, you know, an Ethernet cable and the audio interface, and that's something that I should have.
You might not need the audio. You personally might not need the audio interface. The thing that's really important for you is probably going to be the headphones, right? And the Ethernet cable. If you're getting a new MacBook, you're also going to need a dongle that connects the USB-C to Ethernet. So you'll need an extra connector. But that's they can help you with that at the store easily. But
really, my sound is really, really good. I hear everything. It's usually things on the other end that get messed up. What I think might be getting messed up for me, I don't know if anybody else, I have this sound bar that actually came with my computer. You know, it was like a gift from the, you know, where I bought my Mac. And do they still make, because I think it's starting to go, like the connections, sometimes I have to like play with the connector. Is this something that still exists? I know they have this for like TV, like big ones for TV sets, and you know. Do you know what this is? It's called an edifier, is the brand name. And
I don't know of that specifically, but
it's, you see, it's small, and sometimes if I can't hear people, I actually have to like go like this and put it against my ear.
Another reason why the headphones could be really, really helpful in this situation.
I would rather hold this against my ear than have headphones on, but yeah, and again, you have to go through what you were saying. Everybody's head is different,
sure, and
preferences are different. How do you know if you get something, if it's actually going to work? You know, how do you gauge that? You know, you buy something and try it and go, this is crap, and then not working for me, and take it back. And can you take it back and
rely? Yeah, you can rely on return policies.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
absolutely. I did think of one other thing that we did have a question about for my students that are on Zoom. How can they enable original sound? And I think one thing I've had them do, they have to log out of the Zoom application and go into their app meeting settings. So they have to log in to their app for Zoom, not be live in session, click on that gear icon, and then when they go into their meeting settings, they'll see the option for original sound, enable original sound in. But they can't do it from the active Zoom session. They have to log out, go to the meeting settings, and come back to see that option.
Megan, is that, are you talking about that from a computer and or a cell phone? It doesn't matter, because I know when people do cell phones or even iPads or some kind of tablet, they don't have those options. They don't have the you know.
Yeah, so that's what we're talking
sound.
about for those students that are logging into your lesson via Zoom, and they can't go through the same tree to go to original sound. They have to log out of Zoom, go into the app settings from their phone or iPad to get to that. So we can probably send out a quick little step-by-step for you folks that are having that difficulty. Yeah, that was something that was also a good changer. We can do it. We thought we couldn't, but we can.
Good.
Yeah, Alexis, you have a question?
Hi. Yes, thank you so much. That explains something. Why the one girl I still can't hear is, and she uses an iPad, and she's, you know, thank you so much. But also, and this may be a stupid question, but what about earbuds? The little, you know, I mean, these are the old-fashioned. You plug it in. Are those completely useless, stupid? Does it need to be the whole thing? Because, yeah, they can be constricting, especially for students. Are these just pointless?
No, they're not pointless. I think for students, I would be more concerned about that changing how much of the room they can hear, right? The benefit of this is that it's actually open to the room, so I can actually hear my room my voice bouncing off the walls. But like for you, absolutely, that's a great solution, right? Okay. Use case. And also, if you have a student and they're like, I can use these headphones, I don't have the money to get something else right now, or I don't want to get something else right now, and that allows you to turn off echo cancellation, I think that's a huge boost.
Thank you. Thank you again for the whole thing. Thank you.
No problem.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
if I may. So when you were talking about far play, you said that you can record the sound. Can you also record video? Is it
You
video?
cannot.
It's no video, just
No
sound.
video, right? At this point, just sound.
That's not a selling point for me.
I'm a little old-fashioned, I think. I used to record myself on mini cassettes.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I think that people should be able to see themselves as well as hear themselves, because sometimes it sounds fine, but they're doing something that really
Sure.
look at that and be aware of it. And if they can't see it, that's a shame. You know, it's one of the good things about Zoom is that you can see yourself as well as anyway. But
Agreed.
And just to
Okay.
make sure you hear, Davida, the application has video. You just, when you record, it
Yeah.
only records the audio, right?
Right,
So
yeah, no, I
they
realize
see
that.
themselves during the in-app. Okay.
Yeah.
Just to make sure.
But
Yeah.
sometimes they don't see it, and they have to see it on video in order to go like, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that, or why am I doing that? Or, you know, I mean, so that's that's a shame. But there's no possibility that they might change that.
Oh, I think there's every possibility that they might change that. I just, it's not currently possible.
Just currently available. Okay, all right, intriguing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Anything else from the room? Wonderful. And we'll go ahead and share this resource. It sounded like Josh is going to provide us with the slides from today's presentation, maybe a little bit of our Zoom directions for folks. And then we're going to put it on our YouTube channel, because we've got a YouTube channel, y'all. We're doing our best to fill that YouTube channel up. So hopefully this will be a great resource for at least the next 6 months until everything changes again, right?
Absolutely.
No, I know for me, I really needed this check-in to give my teaching another boost, because some of my students online are not going away. They're going to be with me for the long term. So with that, I want to give another big round of applause to Josh. Thank you so much. And all of you for deciding to come spend time with us here on a Sunday. I so appreciate that. We look forward to seeing y'all at our September meeting at the University of Washington with the University of Washington Performing Voice Clinic. So check your emails and stay tuned about our next event. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks, Josh.